Greetings. I'm Candace Wheeler. I'm the senior producer for Closer Look with Rose Scott here at 90.1 FM WABE. My role as the senior producer of Closer Look with Rose Scott is really, I think, the backbone of what I do is being organized. So we're a team of 4 folks, and it's very important that I'm keeping track of when segments are booked, how we're connecting with our guests, how the research that needs to go into a segment, making sure that Rose knows what's going on in the show for that day, and communicating that also to our engineer, Shelly, because it affects how we actually do the live program. And so I'm also directing the show when it's live. And our program is live every weekday for an hour from 1 to 2. And there's a lot of moving parts to a live show. We have guests coming in and out. There's audio that we play in between segments, music that comes in and out of segments, and I'm making decisions about tone of music, cueing Shelly, our engineer, on when audio is supposed to play. In addition to that, I'm booking segments with guests, doing background research for Rose so she can be as prepared as she needs to be for her interviews, and also coordinating when we do interviews out in the field with people. I actually didn't know that I would have a career in radio. It wasn't something that I was exposed to or interested in as I was growing up. I have always had a passion for the written word. I love to read. I love to write. And so my dream was actually to work for a magazine. And when I was in grad school, it was sort of during the height of the recession, and print publications were closing. And there just frankly were not going to be a lot of magazine jobs. And I realized that I needed to be more realistic about my prospects. And I had the opportunity to apply for a fellowship where I could spend 3 months at the Washington Post and 3 months at National Public Radio in Washington, D.C. And that was my introduction to radio. I knew nothing. I didn't know how to use a recorder. I didn't know how to edit audio. I didn't know about using your voice as an instrument for storytelling. And those are all very key parts of this job. And so the foundations of that all started then. And you have to realize I was not only out of undergrad, I was out of graduate school before I had that experience. And then I had the opportunity to come to Atlanta back home, and I started working as a freelancer at WABE. They taught me everything I know. Everything that I know how to do, I learned at this place, which I don't know if people can really say that all the time, but I truly learned on the job. And so I didn't even know my job existed. The show didn't exist when I first got to WABE. There was no Closer Look. It didn't exist. Rose was still a producer herself when I got here. She used to produce All Things Considered in the afternoon, and Dennis O'Hare, who is now retired, was the host. And so everything that has happened has evolved in my time here, and I've had to evolve with it.
You know, for me, because it seems like it all went so fast. When I moved to Atlanta in '96 and I didn't have a job, I sold T-shirts during the Olympics, and I was just volunteering here and there, and it just seemed like it just went so fast. And then you look up and you're like, you're older. And you think about how you got here, the journey, and it hasn't been that bad. It really hasn't. It's, I remember doing internships thinking, where will I be in X amount of years? And you look back and I think I wouldn't change anything. I really wouldn't. There were some lean days, obviously, when you first got out of college and, you still preparing ramen noodle recipes. But no, I wouldn't change anything. It's been worth it.
President Trump has been planning to meet his Chinese counterpart at one of the gatherings.
The announcement by President Sebastian Pinera is a measure of the huge impact that Chile's protests over inequality are making.
Which one? The one that's all I can think about is you.
It's only 30 seconds. Is that okay?
That's okay. We'll just let it play all the way out.
This is for the first.
This is for the news brief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we're ending with like a state of execution and that. Take out that Lamar. I thought I had put the other Lamar one. That's the wrong
I'll
one.
just put it down here.
Yeah.
Go!
Minute and a half?
You have the cut per page, right? You have that.
Right? This?
Yes, we have it.
Kate? Oh yeah, page bait. Yes.
The U.S. economy slowed to a growth rate of 1.9%. The Commerce Department reporting today that gross domestic product, July to September, came in just below the 2%.
Cloudy skies at 70 degrees. There's rain in some areas. Welcome to this Wednesday edition of Closer Look. I'm Rose Scott.
I had the opportunity to interview Maya, who's a Grammy Award-winning singer and also an actress. And I actually was a fan of her music when I was younger, so I had like a personal childhood connection to her as an artist. But what made it tough for me is that people who are celebrities or people who are in the spotlight a lot, it's hard to think of how can I have a conversation with them that they haven't already had. What can I ask that person that they've not already been asked? How do I make the conversation that we're having engaging and also give the listener insight into something that they didn't already know without it being a fluff piece, right? Because I don't want to just fawn over her hair and her makeup and her great dancing, but I really want to get to the core of who she is. And so that just takes research. It also takes, not enough people think about this, and I don't know if people do this anymore, but this is kind of something that I learned from Rose, is really writing out your questions, but not just writing questions, thinking about the order in which you ask your questions, that you are building a story, you're building a narrative. And so the first question, you need to be just as intentional about what that is as the one in the middle and at the end, because they all need to lead you to somewhere. And now I don't know what her answers are going to be per se. And so I don't know how we're going to end, so to speak, but they need to follow a through line. And so I did that. I had all my questions prepared. We, of course, did not get to half of them because that's always how it goes. But it was great. And then afterwards, she said, really thoughtful. This was really great. And that made me feel awesome because I know she's been interviewed by a million people, many, many more experienced people than me. Is that? No, there's 30 seconds. There's 30 seconds left.
Bad. I think there's too many of them.
So
and
that's
people get
another
carried away
no.
when they're on them.
They
I've
gotta
seen
start writing the
people
out
make
piece on
decisions
that.
I
after
agree.
That was my thing from yesterday.
And I feel like they crowd up sidewalks.
Because Rose is looking at us and we don't
I know. Because I faded it down the
One of the
other
funnest things
day,
I've ever done is burning scooters.
and the guy started talking.
I would
like,
say that we should have them at
"You
night
get
with lights on.
Yeah.
Because there's some of the best
I think she
times
wanted
ahead.
you to do it that time
Traffic,
because we were tired
you're
on
out, you're
time.
with your friends and you want to go to a bar or something.
Okay, so we've had mixed feelings, fun, bad. Birding is fun. Okay, folks get carried away. Well, Atlanta's not the only city that's seeing an increase in the use of e-scooters. And worldwide, investors have already poured more than $5 billion, not just into the e-scooters, but into this, what we call micro-mobility.
Producing a story is something that could take a day, an hour, 3 weeks, 3 months. And I've had all those experiences. A big part of it is really finding the right guest, but also doing your research. One of the things that I find is in the age where you can have information at your fingertips, and you do, so many of us do not use that privilege. We don't think of it as a privilege. We don't have to go to a place where there are books, a library, and do research and look up the book that we need in order to get information. We just do it on our phone. And still, so many of us in this field do not do that. I cannot say enough how often guests will say, "Oh, you really did your homework. Oh, you know about that? Wow. Okay, so you really were keeping up with what's going on." That's our job. Do your research. And so take some time with it. Don't slam to do it the day before, the morning of. Go ahead and start on your research a week ahead of time. And just do a little by little. So segments, we have live conversations in the studio. And in addition to that, we also like to be out in the community as much as we can be. And those field segments take a little bit more time because we have to coordinate timing with guests, location, So those things can take a bit longer. Okay, so I recently did an interview with a woman who is a Spelman alumna who in September celebrated her 100th birthday, which is amazing. And the reason I even found out about Miss Moore is because a longtime listener of Closer Look reached out to us and sent us an email to tell us about her story. And she must have emailed maybe 2 months ago. And so I've been talking to her over that period of time, trying to figure out the timing, but also trying to figure out what was the best way to do that conversation. Obviously, I need to go to Miss Moore. I don't need to ask her to come to me. And so those things are about, well, how do I balance the other things that we have going on? We have a themed week of transit segments going on. So that's going to require me to be closer to the station. Last week, we were actually in the middle of our fall membership drive where we ask our listeners to donate to support the station. So when those things happen, as a producer and also as a senior producer, I have to balance all of those priorities and figure out timing. So it takes a while, but it always happens. It always gets done. Most of the time. Okay, so I don't want to be hokey, but I don't believe in bad days. I believe that we can have bad moments. I don't believe in declaring an entire day bad. That's just me from a philosophical standpoint. And I think that's actually really important when you're a producer, especially I think that's a lesson that I've learned because I'm responsible for directing the show. And so I can't get caught up in my emotions about something that didn't go well because the show has to keep going. And I don't have time to be upset about things that didn't get executed exactly the way that we planned. And I think the most important quality, one of the most important qualities of a producer, in addition to being well researched and organized, is someone who's calm. You know, when you're making live radio, all kinds of things can happen. I have had guests' phone lines drop in the middle of an interview. I have had people be extraordinarily late. I have had to leave during the live show from the studio, get in my car, drive 2 blocks down the street to find a guest who couldn't find our station, drive them back and come back into the booth and continue directing the show. And I think when you're producing, you need to understand that you're the driver. I joke about this with our engineer, but, you know, she says she's my passenger and I'm driving the car, and that's absolutely right. So if I'm driving the car and I freak out and I take my hands off the steering wheel, who's driving? No one. And we're going to have an accident. And so everyone here entrusts me to keep my head on so that we can keep everything moving. And so that's why I say I'm not trying to sound trite, but I just don't believe in bad days because mistakes are going to happen. Things are not going to go as planned. And one of the things that I do say to my colleague all the time, who's a younger producer, is move forward. Not get over it, because I think get over it is a bit dismissive. So honor the fact that something didn't go the way it was supposed to. And if you made a mistake, absolutely own up to that. But we've got to move forward because there's another show to do. It has been great to work with somebody like Rose, who has been doing this for a very long time and who has opened a lot of doors in her own right for people just by her longevity in journalism, but also her longevity in this market in particular. And so it's been really great for me to see how she puts herself forward, what her values are in terms of being a journalist, what her ethics are. I've learned a lot from her about that, and also her commitment to what she calls the community, so that we have the privilege as journalists to sit in rooms and gain access to people and places that the everyday listener doesn't. And so our job to honor that gift, that luxury, that privilege, is to make sure that we are well educated about topics, well researched, and that we hold people accountable. And so she's definitely been a mentor for me in that.
2, 1. And Closer Look continues now here on 90.1 WABE. This is Atlanta's Choice for NPR. I'm Rose Scott. My advice is to just be true to the core of what it means to be a journalist. And if you're going to be, particularly in news, if you're going to be a producer that works in a news environment, hold true to what folks like Ida B. Wells and Edward R. Murrow, what those folks, at the core of what they were doing as journalists. And I think journalists, while we're not advocates in a sense, but we are advocates for good, people who do good. I think we are advocates for disseminating information that's meaningful. I think journalists can affect change, whether or not we set out to do it. We don't participate in rallies or protests, but I think the information that we give people allows them to, if they choose to become activists. It's kind of like, shedding the light on the truth, in a sense. So you look back to how important the news media was during the civil rights movement, during the Vietnam War. We have a job, and our job is important.
So, one of the things that I've been sitting with myself recently that I think people don't say enough to young people, because the time that we're in now, there's so little time for you to just discover who you are. You have to know and be certain about so many things about yourself in a time where you should be able to just experiment and figure things out. But one of the main things that I would say to people who are coming up behind me is to always run towards something with enthusiasm and a sense of purpose and dedication and love for it, instead of running away. So we're always talking about the things that we don't like. That's just kind of how our society is set up. There's cancel culture. There's just griping about things on the internet. Everything is about our dissatisfaction. And I think that people should spend more time thinking about what brings them joy, what makes them feel happy, fulfilled, what makes them feel like they have a purpose, and run towards your purpose, whatever it is. And other people don't have to understand it. That doesn't even really matter. It just matters that you're doing it with a pure heart. And I think that's not like career advice, because I have found that we don't talk enough to people about who they are on the inside. And like, your job can just be a job. But if you're doing something that's meaningful and it's your passion and your purpose, then your heart has to be in it too. And I think not enough people are pursuing their purpose. And we have so many talented people in the world who are not even doing the things that they're supposed to do because they don't think about it that way.